Monarchist Minute. I'm Victor Smith. On Wednesday morning, we learned the passing of one of my father's childhood heroes. Baltimore Colts running back Tom Matte passed away due to complications caused by COVID-19, I believe, on Wednesday morning. He was 82 years old. May he rest in peace. Now, tonight, for our topics, coming up last, we'll talk about the potential civil war brewing in the African nation of Ethiopia. Also, Biden's new vax mandate, what it means and how we react to it. Also, a discussion on the length of terms to elected political office and why having such short terms is not exactly that great. Also, we will discuss the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. But first, congratulations are in order to Mr. Glenn Youngkin and Mr. Jack Murphy on winning their respective gubernatorial elections of Virginia and New Jersey. The New Jersey election was wafer thin, and it seems like the Virginia election was a bit more of a landslide. Joining us to discuss all of these issues is our panel, Charles York, William Staut, and John Arness. We will begin with Charles York on the Virginia and New Jersey elections.
Thank you, Will. I mean, not Will, darn it. Yes, great start. Anyways, thank you, Vic.
Just gotta cut that out. We'll edit that out. It's fine.
You underestimate my laziness.
Maybe we can include it as part of a gag reel or something.
No, you underestimate my laziness. Anyways,
gag reel. This is what goes in the gag reel.
Yeah, okay, why not? Okay, so yeah, so I mean this Virginia. I was kind of surprised to learn that Virginia actually had a Democrat governor because when I thought Virginia, this is back when I wasn't as into politics or it was only on a national level, and this was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Virginia's been red for a while, or not red, blue for a while.
That was surprising, but I don't really know that much about the new Republican governor. For all we know, he may be a neocon, which means that he's a slightly better alternative to a Democrat because he won't. But in regards to New Jersey, I always thought of them as a blue state, but apparently we know a lad who's been on the show before who apparently says that Republican governors actually, for whatever reason, New Jersey just elects Republican governors for some reason. So, okay, okay. But other than that, I mean, the fact that this election was as close as it was in New Jersey, which from my admittedly Michiganian perspective, is one of the most liberal states in the union. Well, a liberal state in the union. It won't beat California anytime soon. Yeah, I don't know. This whole election, I really hope that it may turn things around show signs for the midterms, but I think it bears noting that mayhaps the Democrats are going to try and do all the crazy stuff now, and the Republicans just either will offer the token resistance as usual. And then they'll do less crazy stuff in comparison for the rest of the time, right? So that by the time that the midterms come up, everybody's like, yeah, that was weird, but they totally won't do anything like that anymore, right? Because they've been doing less crazy stuff, Yeah. Anyways, I'll yeet it over to Will.
Yeah, and we definitely need to recognize that Democrats have just been served a big scare, and they're up and they're ready to swing. Now, the question is, with a senile old man for president, the most unlikable Speaker of the House to ever hold the seat, one of the most unpopular vice presidents to ever hold that office, basically the entire Democratic Party leadership is so vehemently hated by the general population of the United States, you have to wonder, what the hell did they think was going to happen?
And I should also point out that the Out Party always does very, very well in midterm elections and this kind of special election type of stuff. We see that very, very consistently throughout American history, especially in modern day politics. And by out party, I mean the party that does not hold the presidency. The in party meaning the party that does hold the presidency.
And usually
Just,
this is also why we don't get anything done, because the other party puts up the resistance, like if whoever's owning the presidency from doing anything, and it's just a big god awful mess. And then one day when the presidency, they manage to undo anything that the former president did, and it's just a vicious cycle of absolute.
I can't remember
Almost like
who
leadership be stable or something. I don't know.
I can't remember who said it, but in Washington you have an evil party, Democrats, and you have a stupid party. And sometimes they will get together to do evil, stupid things. While they're not bashing each other the rest of the time.
That explains the U.S. government in such a simple yet perfect manner. I cannot comprehend how incredible of an explanation of the U.S. government it is.
Yeah, well, eventually things just get so complex and so convoluted that sometimes a single sentence is all you need.
yes. And I want to circle back to the Virginia results in particular.
Ben Psaki or something?
I'll have to check with Joe
We'll
when
circle back to
he
that.
gets back, but I ain't no circle back girl.
We'll circle back.
Anyway, let's go to the Virginia election results. Glenn
Yeah.
Youngkin actually outperformed Donald Trump in the sort of southern or southwestern counties in Virginia in 2020. And that is, I believe, a very good sign. And he kind of kept Trump on a leash, as it were, kept him at arm's length. And I think that could have also helped him win this election. I don't know much about the Republican candidate for New Jersey, but what I do know, from what I do know about him, is that he had to be something real special to get to very, very close to an not just a Democrat in New Jersey, but the incumbent governor of New Jersey. Let's not forget that.
Once you add all of that different stuff, like the incumbent and the Democrat for New Jersey, Jesus, that is something else.
I know that
If you narrowly win as a Democratic incumbent in a Democratic state, something is off. At least in.
I mean, it's inescapable that you will be associated with your party. So if your president is, if the president is the same party as you, it doesn't matter necessarily. I mean, it will matter, obviously, that people love you as a governor. They're still going to love you as a governor. But it will matter to a certain extent how good or bad the president's administration is. And it's sort of like the midterms. You know, people always say the midterms are a referendum on the president's agenda, but especially when you have these very big, important governor races in the midterms, the off years.
I
Anyway,
will say that these elections were not special elections. These elections were
these were regularly playing because Virginia and New Jersey are weird. Anyways, watch as I look up and turns out my state is 2023. But anyways, yeah, no, I mean these are these are really referendums on how well the president is doing. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions. Like once again, if the governor's either really good or really bad, it usually won't matter what the political affiliation is in comparison to the president. But people don't like Biden's administration, and I can understand why, because money print to go burr, which in fairness was something that Trump did with the whole first wave of COVID relief packages, but
And the thing that I've always noticed is they're really efficient at like increasing debt. That's about the only thing the government's really efficient at, and it's because it's a bipartisan thing. Whatever
Absolutely.
bipartisan thing is happening, it's very, very, very efficient. If it's like an agenda of one president, it often goes unfinished and half-assed. Excuse me, pardon my French.
Of course.
But
And I would also like to point out that we should congratulate the first black female governor of Virginia.
I think
Ali,
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant governor, excuse me. I apologize.
there's a
okay.
picture that I posted that I posted on the server that had her with a, I believe, an AR-15. It's pretty based.
Okay, but here's something that kind of bothers me. Okay, yes, it's it's kind of neat for future historical trivia that she will be the first black lieutenant governor. Okay, but
What does it mean?
What?
What does it mean? Like, oh, I'm the first.
Yeah, no. I mean, here's the thing, right? The left has been yelling at the Republicans so long that they are racist, and rather than saying no, we're not, shut up, we say no, we're not totally racist. Look at this example of how we're not racist. Okay, you're lending, even if it's to other than just flat out dismissing it as ridiculous, even just by you're kind of going to their level if you're using their you're racist because you're not diverse. No, we're diverse, man. Right? It's so bothersome. Like the way the Republicans are basically using liberal tactics to
You
own the
cannot,
libs.
like, the rate, your ratio cannot be really even. Like, unless you have like what 10 people in a room together, or an even number of people in a room together, and all of those are divided up between men and women, and somehow you manage to find every single race imaginable, every single variation of the human being. It gets to the point where you cannot like function that way. Like, something has to be either based off meritocracy or based off of like who's the best for this one job. And like, and from what people would bring up was like, oh well, some areas are disproportionately harmful to a certain race or something like that, and but those are factors that we would have to uproot an entire system, I don't know, to really deal with. It just gets to the point where we need to engage the culture before we like say, okay, we need this great level of diversity in everything, and let's just get everyone who may or may not be qualified to do any specific thing. Like, they've made it nearly impossible to try and deracialize everything because they're so fixated on it. And when you do try and address the because it's not black poverty, it's just general poverty that needs to be addressed in America. It's not white supremacy, it's just the it's the rich, that it's the rich that need to be the class of rich people need to be increased, generally speaking. And I think when people look at races in America, like the different races in America, they automatically associate certain things with them, which is entirely, which shouldn't be supported to any degree.
Well,
We need to begin to deracialize, not the other way around. When you divide everybody up and everybody's 50-50 and everybody is like intersectionality, it outlines race, which I don't think is healthy in regards to building a race friendly society. I just don't like it.
Reject race politics, return to class struggle.
Anyway,
well,
I wanted to bring in okay, Virginia is only blue because of the DC suburbs that essentially drown out the rest of the state, in other words. So if the DC suburbs don't turn out for you, you're not going to win as a Democrat in Virginia. Now, what happens with Congress as a result of these elections is going to be a very, very different thing. What we're going to see, I think, could either be the Democrats running to the middle because they're desperate to get something passed, or we could see the Democrats say, hey, it's not the messaging that's the problem, it's something else that's a problem, and just push progressivism. So the Democrats that run to the middle, they don't have to fear a Republican challenger in the general election of their congressional seat. They have to worry about getting primaried by somebody that's more to the left of them. So they have to, Democrats in safe districts have to basically toe the line between going to the middle to try to get stuff done or getting primaried, or stay to the left to try and avoid getting primaried.
See, this is what happens, and we'll get into this when we're dealing with term limits, Like, my comments on Youngkin and the New Jersey situation is, it's not a referendum on the Republic, or it's not a referendum on the state Republic, but it is a step. But then again, everybody talks about, the pendulum swinging, the pendulum's about to swing. And, like, you can't keep a government like that. You can't just, like, keep a stable government that is consistent in its goals through centuries and still maintain this weird schizophrenic view of government where every 4 to 8 years somebody leaves office, and more than likely it's going to switch to a different party that's completely different from that party, and it's even worse when it's a bad party, but as Charles said, it's like you're dealing with a stupid party or a demonic party, and in that dichotomy is just nonsense, and they're both pulling. That's why I said I don't really like the whole concept of a pendulum swing, because history doesn't really work out like a pendulum. There's no two different differing sides pulling against each other. That's a more post Enlightenment thing, where you get into Hegel and all this stuff, where the liberals pulling one way and the conservatives pulling the other way. It's a very really American thing, where you have left and right, conservatives versus liberals. That's not really how monarchies should work, and that's what we'll get into, where Youngkin will get elected, and what's going to happen there? Like, what is that going to do?
Well, I should also point out, in the Virginia House election, the GOP took back the Virginia House. I believe they're called the House of Delegates. They could also be called House of Burgesses. I don't know.
But I believe for a while it was called House of Burgesses. But, it's how long will it last? And that's the thing, like, after every electoral victory, how long will it last? And that's the big thing we need to ask ourselves. How long will our party in charge last? And that has proven to be not that long, unless you have a one-party state. And at least a one-party state, say what you want about it, but at least it's consistent. If it's consistently bad, then you can actually fix it. If it's inconsistently bad, like our system, what are you going to do? The moment you try and fix one side of the coin, immediately it flips over to the other side of the coin, and you just don't get anything done. And that's the problem. That is the problem. And I happen to agree with with a majority of the Republican, big R, Republican Party outlooks, but they're just idiots. They're just incompetent.
I mean, and another thing too with the whole pendulum thing, if we had to use that lens, the pendulum ain't swinging back in certain areas. The pendulum socially has swung so far to the left. Now, this isn't something new. We've been here before. Okay, ancient Rome, before it was Christianized, was just one of the most degenerate societies ever. And Father John Locke, besides in his book Church History, makes the statement that besides divine help, one of the reasons Christendom spread so rapidly throughout the Roman Empire was because people were starting to realize this ain't working, and I guess in that sense, the social pendulum will have to swing. Otherwise, it's going to be our destruction. But
Well, I mean,
we are.
when I talk
See,
about the pendulum swinging back and forth, I'm referring to kind of this weird party struggle. Yes, societies can ebb and flow over time. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the general, the split that came about during around the French Revolution, where you had the
Vive
the
la contre-revolution.
the more modern left versus right came about that hadn't existed before, and it's kind of an unnatural thing that people kind of force into their heads that like government by nature must switch every like 20. Well, even now it's switching every like 8 years, which is ridiculous. You can't get anything done really in 8 years. That's
Well,
why I
you
was like,
can.
and
It's
see,
just you can
and
only do
speak
damage. Oh,
good.
yeah,
Uh,
you can do a lot of damage in
yeah,
4 years, but
and
there's
and
not a lot
that
to do in 4 years,
and a
really.
lot of that damage is permanent, and unfortunately, it's mostly social. Um, and
Yeah, that's
no,
the
but to be
problem.
fair, huh?
What's up?
To
That's
be
the
fair,
problem with oh, dang it.
okay. Let me just say this. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of like LBJ's economics just caused inflation to go through the roof, but really the social damage that has been done in the last 20 years. I mean, it really started after World War II as we started as conservatism in what form it exists. I would argue that we Americans never had conservatism like Europe had conservatism, which was
The big
essentially countering the French Revolution was European conservatism. Um, but
the big
we didn't. Uh,
conservatism.
yeah, well, I mean, and like after World War II, our conservatism was really replaced more by a liberalism, a classical liberalism,
Yeah.
and that allowed and that really gave the right that made the right completely powerless because you can't because the whole liberalism argument like the whole what they're doing in their private homes doesn't affect you that works a lot better on a classical liberal and that's a more effective argument on a classical liberal than it is on a conservative because a conservative would say yes it will affect me because societal morals and yada 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 but classical liberals it doesn't work that way but to sum up I mean it's just the especially in the last 20 years moral damage is permanent even though the parties switch because one
Hmm.
party the stupid party from henceforth the Democrats will be the evil party and the Republicans will be the stupid party. The stupid party is unwilling to resist these social changes. They're not. I mean, the majority of the Republican Party in Congress today would not vote for an amendment that says marriage is between a man and a woman. That is the simple fact of it because they know that because they are just either too lazy or too spineless. And you can call them pragmatist because yes, a majority of the American public does support gay marriage. But since when has compromising on basic moral tenets been something to campaign on? I mean, we can compromise on economics. I'm perfectly willing to compromise on economics so long as that broad economic framework is moral. But you can't compromise on fundamental moral questions themselves, and that's what the stupid party is doing.
Well, the thing is, I don't think they really stood for anything, to be honest. I mean, I might agree with a lot of what they have to say sometimes, but like when you really look at it, you had Trump, who was pro a lot of different stuff, like that I didn't agree with at all, and because he was notoriously loose on abortion, I believe.
I mean,
Um,
I mean, he was more pro life, but I mean, it was I mean, I feel like some of the progress that was made during his administration, like in the pro-life movement, had more to do with the pro-life movements in different
mm,
states than it had to do with him in particular. I mean, I think that him in office helped things, right? I mean, I don't know of any other one-term president that got to make 3 Supreme Court appointments in his term.
I mean, sometimes you get lucky, but with his plans, not a lot of them came true. Really, his agenda might have been decades in the making. It needed to be, and this will lead into the next topic where you have a
Well,
monarch that's able
topic
to
after.
kind of, yeah.
Hey, if I
Let's
may,
see. What's up?
Okay.
I just gotta say, since we're on the topic of Trump right now, it is amazing to me that we are in such a state with conservatism in the US, especially populist conservatism in the US, that a man like Trump, a rich, wealthy plutocrat, a spoiled son that has never really known humility, humbleness, or struggle, a man who has been married and divorced 3 times and cheated on his current wife with a literal porn star, and then paid said porn star hush money to cover the affair. How someone so vulgar and vile becomes the face of conservative values in the United States of America. Now, Charles, you and I don't agree on a lot of things when it comes to values. Like, you and I will go back and forth on the subject of gay marriage because I personally don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think we both can agree that it is sad that someone who is as immoral as Trump managed to become the face of conservative values, and specifically
Yeah.
conservative values.
What he got, okay, the fact that he did do some legitimate good, okay, he did. But like, I know it, like his private life, it's just, oh man, when you look at the president, you want it to be a wholesome story, It's like, oh, he has the wife, he has the kids, he goes to little Timmy's softball game, and then you look at it and it's like, how old is this guy and how old is his youngest son? Like 16? That's
All right.
no, but no, that's beside the point. But it's just, I don't know. I mean, our choices in the last election was mean tweet guy who admittedly made funny mean tweets, and sleepy Brandon.
Yeah,
Anyway, so
yeah.
okay,
Let's go
moving
to
on.
next topic
Moving,
and
yes,
circle back.
moving on.
Circle back
We,
to that
Fin-
after the short
yes,
term thing.
of course.
Sure.
Of course, I wanted to mention something, and I guess I'll mention it after we circle back. Our next topic, sort of related to the Trump conversation. Trump inspired a lot of rallies against him. One of those rallies was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or
well, that was more. That rally was more against the police
yeah,
shooting after the guy grabbed
okay,
a
yes.
knife.
It was against the police shooting thing, and Kyle Rittenhouse took action and in his words defended himself from aggressors by shooting them. Now he is a minor and
Was
he was in possession of a firearm as a minor, which I don't know the law about that. I don't know the law
he's
regarding that.
it's being
Regarding
charged.
that,
It's being charged. That's being charged as a misdemeanor, which is about the only like non-felony he's up for. But if I'm being honest, it. I mean, really. I mean, if you are old enough to drive, you are I would say you're reasonably old enough to handle and mature enough to handle an AR-15 or any weapon. Okay, like if you were competent enough to drive a half-ton piece of metal down the road, you should be which requires all knowledge of all these different rules of to look out for turn on red signs and when it's acceptable to pass people and yada yada yada. You can remember the 4 basic rules of firearm safety. I mean, honestly, if it is a
I
misdemeanor
think
for a minor to
I think
carry a
what
gun, that's
should
a stupid
yeah,
misdemeanor.
what should come first is self-defense,
Hmm.
and after anything after that should be nullified. Honestly,
Yeah.
because you
Unfortunately,
know,
that's not how the law works.
Well, the
well, yeah,
law is stupid.
we're not really discussing what is most legal here because none of us are legal experts. My idea is more of like morally, what do you do in that situation? Because none of us are studying law. None of us are going to be in that situation really ever. So, from my mindset, is what is the most moral thing? The most moral thing is defending yourself and honestly defending yourself. It appears to me like he was just defending himself.
The most
And
thing, in my opinion, the most moral thing he could have done was not go and stay home.
Well,
17-year-old kid has no business being armed at a violent protest. I agree what he did was self-defense, but the fact of the matter is he shouldn't have been armed and he shouldn't have been there.
well, I mean, you see, I heard there's some FBI spy thing that may vindicate him, but I haven't seen that yet, so I won't comment on it. But I feel like okay, in days past, we have called upon far younger people to do more heroic things. Okay, this concept of 18 being adulthood is sort of late in comparison to earlier societies. Heck, I can't remember the whole rhyme, but there was like this. It was a rhyme in the South for like when it was the good time to marry. It's like 14, 15, you're in your prime. 16, 17, running out of time. 18, 19, something. So I can't remember after that. But we have called upon younger people to do more things, not even necessarily of their own free will. So I mean, Kyle, you know, we can get into the debate back and forth on whether or not he should have been there. But I don't think that what he did was necessarily unprecedented. I mean, for crying out loud, the Royal Navy used to take 12-year-olds into battle on warships and have them run back and forth between the powder room to get powder for the cannons. They were in way more harm's way than that because there was no police line to run to. It was
This,
either
this was a time before child labor laws. We have grown as a civilization since then.
well, it's I wouldn't call it child labor, more like youthful experience for a future professional
honestly,
career.
I think I think
Oh my
yes,
God,
I
Charles! You did not just call running to a powder room to supply
yeah,
soldiers
I
with
don't think
weapons
I think there can
Live
be a
right
medium
moment.
where I
experience.
think there can be a medium where yes, children, while they should not work hard labor, absolutely not. That's not a place for children. Absolutely not. I
I
don't
mean,
want
I
my
agree.
10-year-old nephew. I don't want my 10-year-old nephew getting caught in a machine or something. My
Yeah,
main
I
thing,
mean,
but I would like it in place of dying, my 10-year-old nephew being able to defend himself.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying like we should bring back powder
Yeah.
monkeys or anything, but like I'm just saying. I'm just saying we have called
I think
upon.
like distinction can be drawn between a child defending himself and or a child defending themselves, or in a child having to make a living because their parents don't want to do it themselves or their parents are too poor to.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I mean, I would say that yeah, okay. People say the brain doesn't stop really developing until 25. Okay, but 17 years old, which is what Kyle was at the time. I feel like he had his clearly by his actions. I think that he was broadly in a generally good state of mind. Right when there was trouble, he didn't just start pointing his gun at people. He tried to run towards the police lines, and he didn't. When he was attacked, he didn't start shooting wildly at everybody. He only shot at the people and only hit the people who were attacking him. So I feel like so obviously I'm not saying that he was completely calm or anything. I would be totally panicked in that situation. But he kept a level enough head to do reasonably what anybody else would have done when you're massively outnumbered. You tried to resolve the situation by running to the police lines to hopefully, not not get anybody shot. And then when you're beat over the head with a skateboard and somebody tries to grab your gun away from you, yeah, you kind of act kind of act like you have to. So I feel like, even though he was 17 and therefore technically a minor, I feel like, I don't know. I don't think that it was a big deal that he was carrying a gun, especially since this was of his own free will. It's not like his dad was like,
I think
"Okay,
it's more.
son, go out there and
I think
shoot
it was more
them."
troubling that people decided to bum rush a child.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and the fact that he really wasn't even doing anything, and then like the guy's like, and then one of the people he shot, who I think was a pedophile, was like, "Shoot me," and
Yes.
now obviously it is okay. I am not happy that those two people die and the other guy got his arms, a bicep blown out. Okay, preventable loss of life is never a good thing, but Kyle didn't start the fire here, right? Like it's not like the protest showed up because of him, right? It's
I
not
think,
like
yeah, you
he
can open up a can of worms about like the rallies, like what they did, burning down businesses, bum rushing regular, people just minding their own business who happen to be white. Even black people got, their homes vandalized, their stores destroyed, and for what?
yeah
And I think this outlines a bigger problem. Yes, we can talk about the proceedings. Yes, we can talk about the case all we want. But the thing is, we're not trained lawyers. We're not jurors. We're not any of that stuff. We're not going to decide this young man's fate, and that's the thing. Um, I think we need to look at the bigger picture here. Why is it okay to have this type of thing happen on American streets? Like, why is this massive march where, well, I wouldn't even call it a march. It's a riot. And it's equally wrong when you spaz out over a football game or something like that and destroy your hometown than just throw a fit because somebody 1,000 miles away died unjustly.
I
So you're
think
going
I
to
think
destroy thousands.
they're
I
I
think
think what they're sorry for cutting you off. I think what the response to that is going to be is we have a First Amendment right to have a redress of grievances. So we have a right to rally and protest the death of, I believe it was Jacob Blake, this particular incident.
But you do
that
have a
doesn't.
riot, but it goes into the destruction of private property that really nails it home for me. I'm okay with. I am 100% behind people supporting people active being activists over an unjust death. I'm perfectly fine with that. But when you're in this hometown, when you're in this place that people live, people run their businesses, black black business owners, Korean business owners, all of these people, all of them were there trying to make a life for themselves and trying to run a business. And we actually lost a black life. I believe his name's, I haven't heard of his, I believe David Dorn. He was a black retired
Well, no, I mean,
cop.
and this. I mean, sorry to cut you up, but this is the same thing. Okay, we don't. Yeah, we can point out the irony of that. Black Lives Matter was responsible for the death of a black man, but it's better generally just to say a protest over somebody getting killed, or I think the guy they were protesting was just shot and sent to hospital. He didn't even die, I don't think. But
He didn't die. I
yeah,
don't.
the one who was reaching for a knife. Anyways,
Oh yeah.
no, I mean it's more fair to say a person died because of a riot where they were protesting a person getting shot. Okay, people dying, okay, as a result of your actions is pretty clear example that this sort of thing shouldn't be happening. People dying because of riots is never a good thing, in an ironic sense. Okay, if these weren't actual deaths, and if the damage caused wasn't permanent, it might be it might be a funny SNL skit. You know, you know, um, BLM accidentally beats up a black guy while protesting the police beating up a black guy. Right, that might be a funny SNL skit if it wasn't for the fact that replace beat up with kill. It, this is a tragedy, and more importantly, it's more fair to say a man was killed. Okay, the race thing is really just trying to own the libs. But a man died, and men have died in these protests over last summer and
Well, I think
all
it's
that.
more
It's just
important to outline that they do not care about the people in which they claim to care about. I think that's more of a point that we need to make about groups like this. Usually, they use the guise of saying these wide blanketed statements like Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Black lives should matter and do matter. But when you use that statement to burn down black owned businesses and it's not to me owning the libs, it's to me saying, do you really care? Do you really care? And it's like the same thing with, and you could go to the right and say, the NRA, how much do they really care about gun owners? How much do they really care?
they don't.
And it's disheartening because I don't want to live in a racialized culture. And when you bring up these topics, instead of focusing, and it was like what I was talking about earlier, when you focus not on poverty, but people are rich, or why a select group of rich people in America are white, you miss the entire point of class inequality in America. And you miss the picture. You miss the entire picture. Let's discuss, generally speaking, how the poor people are doing in this country versus how the rich people are doing in this country.
Reject
Let's have
class
that conversation.
struggle, embrace class solidarity.
Well, I'm just
Based
saying.
Class
DST.
solidarity?
What?
Did someone say class solidarity?
Like in the Catholic social teaching sense.
Yeah, let's focus. Let's
Oh,
focus on who we need
no.
as opposed to.
Why?
Well, your mic is just not.
Because let's actually
Anyway,
help
Yeah.
people as opposed to
so
making divisions where we don't need to make them.
Yeah.
That's what
and
my
and one of the things that is, in my personal opinion, causing these divisions are short-term limits,
Oh
and
yeah, obviously.
and how they are. Okay, for those of you that don't know, congressmen run on 2-year terms. That's
Hmm.
it.
I think the more appropriate definition for this would be short terms.
Well,
Generally,
Yes.
this is where actually I am going to have to. So, I mean, when it gets partisan, yeah, it's kind of a problem. But the idea of short term limits is for me, I would actually like it so that congressmen, elected officials are term limited because, and I'm going to actually quote what I said in the subreddit. The monarch and the congressman serve two different purposes. The monarch is supposed to be the father of the fatherland. A father's job is never done. A congressman is supposed to represent his people. If he stays away from them for too long, he will not be able to represent them. He will have more in common with his fellows in government than he will with the people he was elected from. And when you think about it, right? So the congressman that I and my parents and everybody in my district are supposed to elect, he's supposed to serve us. The problem is that these congressmen, I think because they're staying there too long, they get more bound up in their party affiliation and doing what's best for the party rather than campaigning for what is best for
do
the
you
Michigan
think,
people.
and yeah, I agree that we are essentially. I mean, we are electing a representative as president. So instead of having a monarch as the executive body or the head of government or head of state, we are giving this representative, so to speak. We are giving this representative the monarch's job in a
Yeah.
way.
And
And
I just wanted to point out that these representatives, typically speaking, on controversial issues, pretty much have to vote party line, otherwise they get attacked.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I mean,
And of course, this leads to other issues down the line. Now, of course, on a regular day in Congress, with something procedural, you're going to get like a near unanimous vote.
yeah, and but I mean, the real problem is, okay, my congressman and the congressman from Michigan in general really should, because Michigan really, we were industrial town, right? I live in one of the old industrial towns in Michigan, and we're sad now. But you know, he should. I think his name is Kildee or something. Anyways, he really should, whenever there is a law that's on the books that the Democrats as a whole are pushing that would be bad for domestic industrial base, because industry is one of the things that's important to us. He should break party lines and vote for us, because it's not good for us if he passes a law that will harm our domestic production, because
This is why, yeah, this is why I believe factionalism is infinitely more important. And I mean, I'm referring to factions, not like factionalism. You know what I mean? People forming factions as opposed to people forming parties, because people forming parties, you have a permanent platform that you're constantly pushing. And and this is why I don't like parties in the representative body. I'm curious to know what your opinion is on senators being term limited. Do you think that that is a thing that needs to happen, especially if we go back to a selected legislature?
Okay, so if the senators are not going to be nobles, okay, let's say like the
Yeah.
nobles of a state select. Okay, so they're just random people
So
selected
for
then
instance,
from the
like,
state
you
body.
would, yeah, for instance, you would like look at somebody who's maybe the second child of a state monarch, say, a duke of whatever, and
Okay,
he's not going to inherit anything. He's kind of being almost how a noble would, how a old noble would send off his second son or third son or fourth son to abbot or something. And
okay, well, okay, so in that case, it's either like nobles who definitely aren't going to take up true noble rules as head of their house and
yeah,
their populace, or just a random private citizens. In that case, I would still say they should be term limited, because because if they're away from home for so long, and I know with the Senate basically being in recess but not official recess because of shenanigans for half the year, they're still at home, but they really should just go there, do what in the Senate, in the case of senators, do what their state government told them to do, and in the case of House of Representatives or House of Commons, whatever we end up calling it, would do what they were elected to do from their constituents. Do that and then go home. Because once again, because when you put a bunch of people in a relatively small room. I mean, obviously Congress chambers are huge, but when you have so many people yeeted in there at once, when you put people in that room and you put people in that building, they're going to start talking to each other, and their positions may just change ever so slightly, but ever so slightly can be ever so crucial. So just get them in, get out, repeat.
I disagree. I strongly disagree. Relationships between representatives and congressmen are important because these relationships help build alliances, they help build committees, and they help people to work together to create policy.
but I think there's a healthy balance between that. Yes, you can have a lifelong friend that has been in Congress, but when you're with that lifelong friend and other lifelong friends for a lifetime, being consistently elected, it just forms an aristocracy, and within the context of a
I'll agree.
representative legislator, it doesn't make sense. Now, I would completely understand if you had an oligarchic, or not an oligarchic, an aristocratic body aside from Congress, like maybe an imperial diet or something like that, aside an aristocratic estate or something like that, or a body of aristocrats, or of
Yeah.
nobles.
And I
that
mean,
would be okay. But I think when you're dealing with a representative body, I think the importance is you need to have those representatives in touch with what the people think within their area. And if it's not, I don't know what to tell you. Now,
yeah,
I do think the Senate needs to be more focused either on I had the idea of kind of technocraticizing the Senate, where it's kind of like appointed by the state government as it was before, but to help and to interact with what is needed. Or we could, go with the aristocratic route of the Senate and just go full Britain and have it be technically our House of Lords, but I don't know about that.
well, no, I mean, with the House of Lords thing, if you want to do an actual House of Lords, where the first, like the nobles themselves who are actually running the things, like
Mhm.
the Duke of Michigan or whatever, right, are the ones there. In that
Mhm.
sense, the Senate would be more of like a permanent, I guess, almost sort of like I guess like akin to the court of the king or emperor or whatever we end up
Yeah,
calling
that
them.
sounds
King.
like as for when I laid out the system, the structure of the imperial diet, at least the American imperial diet, how that would function, is that would be a place that state monarchs and state leaders could convene and almost coordinate, and it wouldn't have any power on its own, but those people with power could convene and coordinate their efforts nationwide.
Yes,
So
and
what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the imperial diet. So, in my opinion, I think the Senate might want to be kind of as needed, almost like, I know you don't like the word, but technocrats
yeah,
as far
well, I mean,
as experts.
and what I'm also saying is that because once again, like you have the king who's supposed to be father of the fatherland, but then you have
Hmm.
the lesser nobilities who are supposed to essentially fulfill a similar role to the king, but just in their own area, right?
Not similar. I would say
Well,
exact.
yeah, well, this okay, well,
Mm, yeah,
basically the same role, right? So in that sense, it wouldn't necessarily. I mean, you can have them ratify proposed legislation and have them present that to the king, but it would be a lot more personal than just the entire House of Lords saying like, "Hey, king, let's do this." It would also be um, individual members or small groups of the lesser nobility, like maybe from the Great Lakes region, coming together and say,
mhm.
"Hey, King, we had this idea about a law that would like greatly improve, say, the shipping industry on the Great Lakes, and this is an issue that is important to the people that God has given us the right to help rule." You know, so the these and obviously for things that affect the entire fatherland as a whole, like some great moral issue,
That's the
um
big reason why the monarch should overhead interstate
everything.
commerce and be the mediator between states, because ultimately, all
We'll
of
have
this.
more, and we will have more on interstate commerce next week.
We
Yeah.
will.
What?
I
Uh.
just I have one final interjection.
Okay.
Back to the whole argument that an elected official will eventually lose touch with the people. The people can then vote said elected official out of office. An elected official should be able to run as many times as they want, and as so long as the people elect them and deem them fit, then they should have the right to represent.
I mean,
That's
Oh,
I mean the problem. I mean, I'll just say this, and then you can say something if you want to counter it because you haven't been able to talk as much. But I think the problem is people will just say, "Oh, this is the dude," because I think in a lot of ballots aren't they just like listed as the incumbent listed first, anyways, or is it purely alphabetical? Anyways, I don't know. I just feel like people will just get into this. The new guy isn't messing up too bad. So, I mean, the guy we have isn't messing up too bad, so let's just go with him and not give the other guy a chance. Sort of
correct.
you
dealio.
And
I'm actually
which is
surprised by this
Right
result.
to do that, though. They have the total right to do that. If they feel comfortable with their current representative, that's their right to continue to choose them. Why
Okay.
would they try and
I don't
fix
know.
something that isn't
I
broken?
think that's how you get. I think that's how you
Well, it
get.
is kind of broken.
I think
Okay.
like that's honestly how you get a kind of because having a regular aristocracy is fine. I have no problem with having a regular aristocracy. I have a problem with a legislator parading around as a legislator while being an aristocracy in name only. So my thing is, yeah, you have the incumbent, but and I've learned about this in American Gov. The incumbent will always have an advantage, and at the same time, the incumbent will after every single election be more and more comfortable in his lead as his and that's where you get people like Harry Reid, people like Mitch McConnell, people like Lindsey Graham, who are like well over 50 years old as can be, and yet they're still getting reelected and they're still getting all of this stuff. I think it's better for the people to have the foreknowledge that, hey, these guys aren't supposed to be just reelected and reelected and reelected and reelected and reelected over and over again, because that's not the point of representational government. That's the point of representational government is having a representative that is as close to you as possible. Now, if you don't want a representative government, at least in that sense, don't do it to begin with. But I think if you're making that, if you have a legislator, own it as a legislator, own it as a representative legislator. Don't like don't make it a legislator and then have an unlimited amount of terms that a person could make, because inevitably it's going to turn into kind of like a soft aristocracy. I'd rather have a hard aristocracy than a soft one.
I just really wish you would use the Aristotelian oligarchy for the bad and aristocracy for the good, because it kind of gets confusing.
And
I would,
speaking of aristocracy, actually, William, I'll let you make your point, then I'm going to interject.
all right. I would counter that point by stipulating that one, aristocracies emerge in a number of different ways, and honestly, that would probably be one of the ways where we'd eventually slowly get an aristocracy in the U.S. Two, I would make the argument that part of the reason that people like Mitch McConnell keep getting elected is due to the bi-party system. There aren't exactly a lot of pathways to get good new options in, and that they might not be re-electing the incumbent because they like the incumbent, but because they don't feel like that they have a good option for a replacement for the incumbent.
Well, I
Okay,
mean,
and
yeah,
switch.
I think most voters honestly are going to take the path of least resistance, and when you have a new guy, the voters are going to feel more honestly. They're going to be more lazy, and they're going to see the incumbent as the easier choice simply because it's the demon you know versus the demon you don't. That's honestly what my opinion is.
All right, moving on to from the legislative branch to the executive branch. President Biden, through OSHA, has issued a new date for the mandate to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Federal workers will be required to get the shot by November 22nd. I'm going to assume that means full vaccination. Private sector employees, which I would imagine, meaning any company that employs 100 or more employees, they will have until January 4th to receive the COVID-19 vaccine.
I think it's January 4th when the whole the whole vaccinated or weekly test thing actually goes into effect, because Biden's
Yeah.
press conference was just a press conference. Um,
I think we've talked about this before, but my opinion is that honestly, if you're going to have a vaccine mandate, you need to apply. You need to have exceptions to that, because I
well,
know
no,
somebody personally who has actually had a very negative reaction to the vaccine.
well,
So, I mean,
well, the
you
reason,
need to be able to opt out of it. Is
well, no,
my
no, I mean the reason I brought this up is partly because we all knew this, and I think most of us just kind of thought that this was already in effect, but it was really just a press conference. Um, there's public comment okay, people are like the 100 businesses or more. They're like, oh well, I work for a bookshop that employs like 5 people, ooh, whatever. Um, there's public comment going on for this extending the same rule to all businesses. So if you have 99 or less, you ain't safe. So if you're a one person LLC, I guess that means that it's either get that. And you know not to sound like calling out the libs for what they claim to care about, like but um yeah, how are poor working class people gonna have time to go to the testing place like once a week? Do that over and over and over and over and over. I'm sure the boss man is gonna just love that. Hey, boss, I'll have to show up an hour later than normal because I have to get this test. Oh boy.
Anyway, so we are not going to make any declaratory public health statements, as it were, criticizing or anything regarding the actual policy itself. What we will do, though, is encourage you to, if you feel that the vaccine is good, we encourage you to receive said vaccine so that we can make it through this pandemic safely and effectively. Although there may be some things that seem to suggest the opposite, but we will not go into that as that is a matter of public health.
Hmm.
Coming up next, our final big topic will be on the impending conflict in the African nation of Ethiopia, and I will allow someone else to introduce us to that topic. After that topic, we will have my final word.
Um. Yeah. I was sort of the one, I guess, who brought this up. It's really not. And it's been going on for about a year. The long and the short of it is that there was this one racial group that used to be in power, but now they're not in power, so now they're rebelling against the new government, and it's just this is typical monarchism uniting different ethnicities under the crown. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. We're both in service of the same crown, sort of like, back when we had the 3 kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland. It's like we may be English, Scottish, and Irish, but we're all still under our beloved good King Charles, and that whole ordeal. It's just seeing Ethiopia, Abyssinia, whatever you want to call it, going through this is just
I feel we need to explain more the context behind it. I forget the specific name of this ethnic group.
it's like
They're the
it's a
ones
piece
that
of
were
tape.
primarily responsible for the war effort that overthrew the revolutionary government in 97, I believe.
Honestly, I'm gonna say this: it was a huge mistake deposing or getting rid of the Ethiopian emperor. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say.
I
Because
don't disagree, but I'll
it's
get to that in a moment. But
especially in Africa, you have so many tribes and so much possibility for ethnic conflict. It's not the best place to have, because immediately when you remove a monarch in that nation, in that area, you remove the personal connection to that nation. So when you have a monarch gone, then that means that wars are just going to inevitably break out, and that's what happened here.
And Ethiopia isn't even necessarily an artificial state. You look at the
Yeah.
stereotypical.
And it's like crazy. Even it being not an artificial state, without a monarchy, you just get
Yeah,
death.
and this it is bashing your head against a wall, because this is one of really the main benefits of monarchism, is that you can have different cultures, assuming that those cultures are still on a basic level. They're the basic morals of the cultures are still the same, or at least broadly similar. But you can have different cultures if you have a monarch who unites them. like once again, like you had in the Three Kingdoms. But this whole republic can't do this. Republics need a single national ethos, and that will naturally conflict with these different ethnic groups. And so one of them has to be the favorite.
Well,
Okay, you
I
can't
think
have a republic like.
you can have a national ethos with a republic, but it doesn't have a personal face like a monarchy does.
Well, no,
It's
I mean,
not encapsulated within a monarch. So when you have a republic, specifically like ours, which tries to have subdivisions and tries to at least adhere to some variation of subsidiarity, you still have problems, and and we just elect our problems away, but that doesn't work because we're inevitably inching towards not a I hope to God not a civil war, but at least an era of turmoil. Because we don't really have that. Like, we don't really have a national ethos. We have kind of like, yeah, we have a national ethos, but we don't have a face to go with that national ethos. What are you gonna look? You're gonna look at Joe Biden as the face of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I'd look at
I
him
wouldn't
as
What do
more
even
you
of the
say
have?
he's the
face
face of
of.
life at this point. I'm not sure
Yeah,
he's all there.
let
I
alone
would look at him as more
go ahead.
of the face of. I'm sorry to say this. The face of the face of dementia patients.
The face of
That's
death,
cruel.
uh, authoritarianism, and the pursuit of one's self destruction.
Oh,
Anyway,
I have no
and
sympathy
speaking of
for that
oh,
because
sorry, go ahead,
he
John.
stared my favorite Supreme Court justices, Justice Thomas, in the face and accused him of the same thing they accused Kavanaugh of. I don't want to hear any sympathy coming from that guy. He's been a snake for about 40 or 50 years, and since his luck's finally catching up with him and he's declining in mental faculties, everybody's like, "Oh, poor old Joe." He was a snake most of his life.
Yeah,
He got
I mean,
caught the
Anyways,
first time.
circling
look,
in.
John, it was a different time. The
Yeah,
1990s were such a different
yeah.
time.
You could totally say as
Ethiopia.
a elected official, we're living in a racial jungle, quote unquote, by Biden. That's a quote that Biden said. So, but it was a
Okay,
different
so
time. It was a different time. Come on now,
Oh,
guys. We got to
come
get
on, man! It was like 2 years
time,
ago.
bro.
It was like
all
last
right.
year.
So one point
No.
that I forgot to bring up when we were talking about all the way back to the beginning, we were talking about the elections. I wanted to bring up the point that this is the first time in recent memory that I remember a GOP candidate making education one of his top priorities and winning on it.
Education is just forgotten now. At this point, education is forgotten. People only care about CRT and then anti CRT. So it's just that, but they don't actually look at the fact that education as it stands right now in America is completely busted.
All right,
We
and
would have to do an entire episode. We can't get into
Yeah,
it.
we
we'll
would
get
need to
back
do
to
one episode on education.
uh,
That
yeah, and we will do a full episode on education, but we have to hand the mic back to William. He has a note on Ethiopia. William, take it away.
Yeah.
There's one thing in Ethiopia that I've noticed is like the US, and it's very, very disturbing. After this ethnic group, who, again, name escapes me, overthrew the
I believe
revolutionary
it's
government.
the Tigray.
Yeah, something like that. But after they overthrew the revolutionary government and created their own government where they held an overwhelming advantage, they monopolized the political environment of Ethiopia for almost 20 years until 2018 when they were forced to step down and the parliament actually enforced an equal representation amongst the different ethnic groups. And so, part of the reason that they're rebelling and fighting this now civil war that's threatening the capital of Addis Ababa. They are fighting it because their democracy, I say that in quotation marks, democracy no longer benefits them, so it's no longer a suitable democracy. Now take a look at the election of 2016. Take a look at the election of 2020. We are seeing the same thing happen in the United States as we speak that is going on in Ethiopia. The only thing is, one of the sides hasn't gone postal yet and declared total civil war.
I don't know. The postal service union's on the side of the Democrats.
All right, and
About postal
now
service unions, my postal worker won't use the dang mailbox I have on my porch, so I have to put a half-assed one at the sidewalk.
that is a bit of
Lazy.
that is a bit of problem. All right, and now for my last word. Thanksgiving, as you know, Thanksgiving is coming up in a few weeks, and food banks need your help now more than ever in order to feed those that are less fortunate than ourselves. So consider donating either money or food to your local food bank so they can provide food boxes for families and individuals in need so they can enjoy Thanksgiving dinner coming up.
Also, research your local soup kitchens. They're always looking for volunteers to help provide hot meals for people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
don't shy away from doing it yourself. Going into a soup kitchen and offering your help to help feed the homeless or anything like that. We do that in our college area for mission work and stuff like that. Don't shy away from doing that. Even if you can't give your money, you can at least give your time and your effort because that's what counts and that's what'll
And
people's
you
life.
know, to quote from a Christmas Carol that doesn't get enough love, therefore, Christian men be sure, wealth or rank possessing, ye who will now bless the poor, shall yourselves find blessing.
My scout troop every year works with one of the local Lutheran churches and helps out with
Yeah.
their soup kitchen on Thanksgiving morning so that they can provide hot meals for all the people who can't have Thanksgiving dinners themselves.
And we should also mention that on the night that we are recording this is Guy Fawkes Day. And for more information on Guy Fawkes Day, I will hand it over to Charles York, and then we will close.
Yes, the resident Jacobite must also be the resident Stuart guy. Okay, so essentially, the Protestants were being many cringe to the Catholics, and so some Catholics in England got tired of it, so they decided to blow up Parliament. Meaning Guy Fawkes was the last person to enter Parliament with honest intentions. But anyways, so the whole ordeal is sort of, if you're a regular Englishman, you'll probably say the Guy Fawkes poem or whatever, and if you're a Catholic like me, you'll probably mark this as somewhat of a somber day. But it is a lesson in having a step two, because what exactly were these conspirators' plans once they blew up Parliament? Like, they didn't have, as far as we're aware, they didn't have a step two. So if you're planning on staging a coup, maybe plan on doing something. But anyway, afterwards, it's like when everybody stabbed Caesar, and they wanted to. They had like this vague notion of restoring the Roman Republic, and it's like that. It's like when Plankton from SpongeBob says, when someone's like, "What are you going to do now?" And Plankton says, "I don't know. I didn't think I'd get this far." I don't know. I don't know. Like, obviously the struggle of Catholics in England is something near and dear, and the British Isles as a whole is near and dear to my heart. Being partly, English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish, but also being a huge Anglophile, and also given that, and we Americans basically our entire audience, save one English feller, as we looked at our YouTube analytics today, is American. You have to understand everything that happened in Britain pre 1776. That's our history too, right? So Henry VIII splitting, being cringe, and creating the Church of England, being a schismatic, and then Queen Mary trying to fix it, and then Queen Elizabeth I, messing it up and going full heretic rather than just schismatic. That is part of our history, right? That explains why America. That really partly explains America's intense anti-Catholicism. Like, people forget that the Klan wasn't just anti-black; it was also anti-Jewish and anti-Catholic, and that was part of the reason why. These things are a part of our history, and it is important for us as Americans to learn about Guy Fawkes and the Stuart period, and the Stuart period in general, as it is learning about the Civil War period, because this is our past, right? We're separated by an ocean, and our histories were severed really in 1776, where now we have these two different parallel things going off, but this is our history, and we should learn it, and we should learn from it.
Absolutely. And we should absolutely learn from our history. And another important note coming up this coming Thursday is Veterans Day. I'll have more on that in my last word for next week. And next week, we will mostly discuss the Interstate Commerce Clause, plus we will have a plug from our friends at Monarchist Action for an upcoming event in January. And now we will close in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
All right, that wraps things up for this week. If you would like to join us live, Fridays at 8 p.m. in our Discord server, link is in the description, as well as a link to all of our other social media channels. And as always, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.